I want to begin today with a question, not one to answer out loud, but one to sit with for a moment. What have you been putting off because you don't feel ready? Maybe it's something big. Maybe you're thinking about starting a business or writing a book. Maybe you want to launch a podcast or move to a new city. Maybe it's time to end a relationship or begin one. Maybe there's a difficult conversation that needs to happen, setting a boundary you've known needed setting for some time. Or maybe it's something quieter. Finally forgiving yourself, trusting your intuition, allowing yourself to be seen, believing that you're worthy of the life your heart keeps whispering about. Whatever it is, I think we've all been there, waiting for the right time, for more confidence, for one more sign from the universe, waiting until the fear disappears. And on the surface, it all sounds incredibly reasonable. We tell ourselves we're just being responsible. We're planning, preparing, researching, thinking it through. So let's validate this, because preparation matters. Wisdom matters. There are absolutely times when slowing down is the right thing to do, but there is a line, a very subtle one. And once we cross it, preparation becomes procrastination, dressed up in really convincing clothing. But here's what I've noticed. Fear rarely introduces itself by saying, "Hey, I'm fear." Nope. Fear is much more sophisticated than that. It shows up sounding intelligent, responsible, practical. It whispers, maybe wait another month. Read one more book. Take another class. You'll know when you're ready. And before you know it, months become years. Years become decades. And the dream that once made your heart beat a little faster slowly becomes a story you tell yourself about why you never started. I don't think most dreams die because people fail. I think most dreams quietly disappear because people spend their lives waiting for a feeling that was never coming. Because here's the truth that changed everything for me. Ready isn't a feeling. It's a decision. And once I understood that, it completely changed how I looked at fear, how I looked at growth, how I looked at every major decision that I've ever made.
Welcome to Aligned AF, real talk for evolving souls with Yahweh Kent. Join Yahweh for honest conversations on spiritual growth, the messiness of life, and how to move through it all at a higher frequency. So grab a cup of tea and let's sail in. This is Aligned AF, and here's Yahweh.
Welcome back to Aligned AF, real talk for the evolving soul. I am Yahweh. I want to thank everybody for joining me today, whatever day it may be for you. I got to tell you, I'm excited, not just for this episode, but for the way the podcast is growing in its second season. It's really starting to take off. That first year, it started out a little awkward. I had some amazing guests. I had some goofy looking episodes. You could tell I was learning. And then I had a really long hiatus from December until April. But now that I'm settled in Ashland, I'm ready to rock and roll. I've been putting out solo episodes. I've got an amazing lineup coming in August and September for guests. People have been reaching out to me, asking to be on the show, just wanting to share their tools. And it's been really, really amazing. So thank you for all of you that listen regularly. Please remember to like and subscribe because it really does help the algorithm. Not only does it alert you when new episodes are available, but it also helps it kind of spread out to other listeners that may be looking for some of the same answers that you were looking for. So thank you again. Remember to like and subscribe. Remember to share it. And now let's dig into what we're doing today. So I want to ask you something. If you think back over your life, really think about it. Not the everyday moments. Think about the moments that divided your life into before and after. What comes to mind? Maybe it's becoming a parent or getting married or getting divorced, losing someone you loved, changing careers, moving across the country, starting over, finding spirituality, walking away from a version of yourself that no longer fit. So here's the question. Did you actually feel ready? Or did life simply invite you into a version of yourself you'd never been before? Because I honestly can't think of many truly life-changing moments where I woke up one morning thinking, you know what? I have complete confidence. I've got this all figured out. It's not usually how transformation works. Transformation almost always begins with uncertainty, with shaking hands and racing thoughts, with your stomach doing somersaults while your heart quietly whispers, go anyway. We expect ourselves to feel like experts before we've ever allowed ourselves to become beginners. And that's impossible. Imagine standing at the edge of a swimming pool. Now, I've used this reference before. You've spent months reading books about swimming. You've watched every YouTube video you can find. You've interviewed Olympic swimmers. You've understand buoyancy and breathing techniques and stroke mechanics. You know everything there is to know except one thing. You've never actually gotten into the water. At some point, knowledge reaches its limit, and experience becomes the teacher. Life works the same way. You don't become ready by thinking. You become ready by participating. You don't become courageous by studying courage. You become courageous by making one courageous decision, and then another, until one day you look back and you realize that the person you were waiting to become was quietly being built through every uncomfortable step that you took. I think we often imagine confidence as the starting line. Like one morning we wake up and suddenly feel completely fearless. We feel certain, clear, perfectly aligned. We'll hear some imaginary voice saying, congratulations, you are now officially ready to begin your life. Has that ever happened? To anyone? Anywhere? Because it certainly hasn't happened for me. Confidence has never ever shown up first, not once. Action shows up first. Then confidence caught up later. And when I look back over my own life, that pattern repeats itself over and over again. So for instance, when I started this podcast, do you think I felt ready? Not even close. I had the microphone, I had the camera, the lights, the software. I watched tutorials. I compared equipment. I thought about different formats. I wondered if my voice sounded weird. I questioned whether anyone would even listen. I found 100 tiny things before I hit record. And every one of those things sounded perfectly reasonable. But eventually, I had to admit, the microphone wasn't the problem. The lighting and the camera and the editing software, those weren't the problem. The real problem was that I was waiting for the version of me who had already recorded 50 episodes before I'd ever recorded one. I was waiting to become someone that only action could create. And I find that fascinating. I was waiting for confidence, but it turns out confidence was waiting for me, waiting on the other side of that first recording, the first upload, the first awkward episode, the first mistake, the first lesson. Because that's where confidence has always lived. Not before the beginning, after it. And I wonder how many of us are doing exactly the same thing. Now, maybe your dream isn't podcasting. Maybe it's writing a book or changing careers, opening your own business, healing a relationship, leaving one, learning to paint, going back to school at 50 or 60 or 70. Maybe your dream is simply becoming more fully yourself. Whatever it is, could it be that you're waiting for a version of yourself that only exists after you begin? Just sit with that for a moment. Because I think that's where the real shift begins. Not when fear disappears, but when we realize fear was never supposed to disappear in the first place. I hope you're enjoying today's episode. You know, sometimes we spend so much time talking about healing that we forget there's support available while we're doing the work. If something from today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love to walk alongside you for a while. Through truth coaching, we gently uncover the stories and beliefs that may be keeping you stuck so you can reconnect with the wisdom that's already within you. I also offer distance Reiki and Metatron Cube installations for those who feel called to experience healing from a more energetic perspective. You don't have to have everything figured out before reaching out. You don't have to be in crisis. Sometimes all you need is a conversation with someone who can help you see what you've been unable to see on your own. If you'd like to learn more, reach out to me at alignedafpodcast@gmail.com. Now, let's get back to today's conversation. You know, I don't think fear gets enough credit. Not because it's stronger than we are, but because it's smarter than we give it credit for. If fear walked into our lives wearing a black cloak, waving a red flag, and yelling, "Hey, I'm here to keep you from living your purpose," we would recognize it immediately, and we'd laugh, and we'd call it out, and we'd refuse to listen. But fear doesn't work that way. Fear is subtle. It's patient. It's persuasive. It rarely shouts. It whispers. It slips into your thoughts so quietly that after a while, you stop hearing its voice and you start believing it's your own. That's what makes it so convincing. Have you ever noticed the kind of things that fear says? Maybe next year. You're still learning. You need more experience. What if people judge you? What if you embarrass yourself? What if it doesn't work? Those thoughts don't sound dramatic. They sound responsible and logical. And that's why they're so dangerous. Because they don't feel like fear. They feel like wisdom. So here's the question I had to ask myself one day. Is this wisdom? Or is this avoidance wearing wisdom's clothes? That question stopped me in my tracks. Because I realized something uncomfortable. Sometimes what I called discernment was actually hesitation. Sometimes what I called preparation was actually procrastination. And sometimes what I called waiting for guidance was simply waiting for certainty. And life doesn't offer certainty. It never has. Think about it. There are no guarantees in love, no guarantees in parenting, in business, in friendships, in health. No guarantees that tomorrow unfolds the way we expect. So why do we demand certainty before taking the next step? Maybe because certainty feels safe. But growth has never lived inside safety. Growth lives just beyond it. I think every one of us has an internal storyteller. And if we're not paying attention, that storyteller starts writing fiction. Not because we're trying to deceive ourselves, but because the mind hates uncertainty. It would rather invent a painful certainty than sit inside an unknown possibility. So we tell ourselves stories. If I fail, everyone will know I'm not good enough. If they reject me, it means I never deserved the opportunity. If I make the wrong choice, I'll ruin everything. If I wait a little longer, I'll finally know exactly what to do. Can I let you in on a little something? Almost none of those stories are about the situation. They're about identity. What they're really saying is, what if this proves something terrible about who I am? And that's where fear digs its roots, not into your circumstances, into your identity. Because if fear can convince you that failure means you are a failure, you'll stop taking risks. If fear convinces you rejection means you're unlovable, you'll stop being vulnerable. If fear convinces you mistakes define your worth, you'll stop trying new things. But what if we've been measuring failure all wrong? Think back over your life, the moments that taught you the most. Were they your victories? Or were they the times life completely knocked you on your ass? Now, I know for me, some of the greatest wisdom I've ever gained came wrapped inside experiences I never would have chosen. At the time, they felt like endings. Looking back, they were beginnings. Life has a funny way of doing that. Sometimes it closes a door, not to punish us, but because we've already outgrown the room. Here's something I don't think we talk about enough. People spend so much time asking, what if I fail? But I don't hear anybody asking, what if waiting costs me more? What if staying exactly where you are is the bigger risk? Every day that you postpone becoming who you already know you're capable of becoming, something is happening. You may not notice it, but something is happening. Every time fear gets the final vote, fear grows a little louder. Every time hesitation wins, hesitation becomes a little more familiar. Every excuse becomes another vote for the identity you've been trying to leave behind. And eventually, you don't just hesitate. You begin to believe you're a hesitant person. That's how identity gets built. Not in one dramatic moment, but in thousands of tiny decisions. The beautiful thing is, the opposite is also true. Every act of courage, even the small ones, changes your relationship with yourself. Making one difficult phone call, speaking one uncomfortable truth, submitting one job application, recording one podcast, writing one page, setting one healthy boundary. None of those moments seem life-changing by themselves, but they aren't changing your life overnight. They're changing the person living it. That's where transformation actually happens, not all at once, but one decision at a time. I used to think the comfort zone was this peaceful little place where nothing bad happened. But now I see it differently. The comfort zone protects you, but it also confines you. It's like living in a beautiful room with locked doors. At first, it feels safe, predictable, manageable. But after a while, you start looking out the windows. You wonder what life might have looked like if you'd opened the door. That's when comfort quietly becomes confinement. And here's an interesting thing. Discomfort isn't always a sign you're doing something wrong. Sometimes discomfort is simply proof. Proof that you're growing beyond the walls that you've created for yourself, that you're living inside. Maybe the anxiety you feel isn't your soul saying, don't go. Maybe it's your soul saying, this is unfamiliar. And there's a difference. One protects your well-being. The other expands your life. Learning to tell the difference, that's wisdom. Not waiting until fear disappears, not waiting until certainty arrives. But learn to ask, is this fear trying to protect me? Or is it trying to protect the version of me that's afraid to change? And once you begin asking that question honestly, everything starts to shift. Because maybe, just maybe, the person you've been waiting to become is waiting on the other side of one decision. You know, there's an idea we hear all the time in personal growth circles. People say, become your future self, or ask yourself what your future self would do. Now, I understand what they're trying to say, but the older I get, the more I think we've misunderstood the idea. Because we talk about our future self as though they're a real person, waiting somewhere out there ahead of us. Like one day we'll finally catch up to them. We'll finally become disciplined. We'll finally become confident. We'll finally become healed. We'll finally become wise and ready. But I don't think that's how it works. I don't think your future self is waiting for you. I think your future self is being created right now with every decision you make today, every choice, every response, every excuse, every act of courage, every moment of honesty, every moment of avoidance. They're all laying bricks. And brick by brick, you're building someone. So the question isn't whether you're creating your future, because you are. The question is, who are you creating for that future? So imagine two versions of your life. Not fantasy, not wishful thinking, just two different paths. On one path, every time fear speaks, you listen. Every opportunity gets postponed. Every dream gets another excuse. Every difficult conversation gets delayed. Every calling gets pushed into someday. 5 years go by, 10, 20. You wake up one morning and nothing terrible happened. You survived. But something else happened too. The person you could have become never got introduced to the world. Now imagine another path. Same fears, same doubts, same uncertainty. Nothing magically disappears. But each time fear says, wait, you answer, maybe, but I'm taking one step anyway. Not 10 steps, not 100, just one. One phone call, one written page, one conversation, one job application, one recording, one boundary, one apology, one act of forgiveness, one uncomfortable moment at a time. Now imagine that life 5 years later. who do you think that person has become? Not because life was easier, but because every decision quietly whispered, I trust myself. That's what courage really teaches us. Not that life is safe, but that we can survive living it. One of the biggest misconceptions about transformation is that it happens in dramatic moments. We picture mountaintop experiences, huge breakthroughs, lightning bolts of enlightenment. And don't get me wrong, those moments happen. Sometimes life changes in an instant. But most lasting transformation doesn't. Most transformation happens quietly. Nobody applauds it. Nobody posts about it. Nobody even notices. It's choosing to get back up after disappointing yourself again and again and again. It's keeping the promise you made to yourself, even when nobody would know if you broke it. It's sitting down to write when inspiration isn't showing up. It's going for the walk. It's making the call. It's meditating for 10 minutes. It's drinking the water. It's taking the deep breath before responding instead of reacting. Those moments seem so ordinary, but they're sacred because every action says, this is who I am becoming. James Clear talks about identity being shaped by repeated actions, and I think he's right. We don't become something because we declare it once. We become something because we repeatedly behave like that person. Think about that. Every day you choose courage, even in tiny ways. Eventually, courage stops being something you do, and it becomes someone you are. The same is true for kindness, integrity, patience, self-respect, compassion, confidence. They're not personality traits. They're practices. One thing I've come to believe, and you can take this or leave it, I don't think the universe has ever asked us to be perfect. I think perfection is one of humanity's inventions, not the universe's, because nature isn't perfect. Go outside, okay? Look at the trees, the rivers, the mountains, the ocean. Nothing is perfectly symmetrical. Nothing unfolds in a perfectly straight line. Everything bends and adapts and grows through the seasons. So why do we expect ourselves to grow differently? Why do we believe our spiritual journey should be neat? Why do we believe healing should happen without setbacks? Why do we think purpose should arrive with complete clarity? Maybe we're trying to live according to the rules that life itself never follows. Maybe growth has always been messy. Maybe courage has always included fear. Maybe becoming who you're here to become was never supposed to look polished. Maybe it's supposed to look human. And honestly, isn't that beautiful? Because it means you don't have to earn your right to begin. You don't have to become extraordinary before you take the first step. You simply have to decide that today matters, that this moment matters, that this choice matters. Because every life, every meaningful life, is built one ordinary decision at a time. Maybe that's what readiness really is. Not waking up one morning without fear, but waking up, looking fear in the eye, smiling just a little, and saying, you're welcome to come along, but you're not driving anymore. I'd like to leave you with a picture, okay? Imagine just for a moment that it's 5 years from today. Not tomorrow, not next month, 5 years. Close your eyes if you can, or simply imagine it. So you're sitting somewhere quiet. Maybe it's your favorite chair. Maybe you're outside watching the sun disappear. Maybe you're on a beach or you're in a place that you've never seen before. Wherever you are, life has continued. Some things worked out exactly the way you hoped. Some things didn't. Some people stayed. Some people left. You laughed more than you thought you would, and you cried more than you expected. Life happened just like it always does. Now, across from you sits another person. At least, it looks like another person. Until you realize it's you. 5 years older, 5 years wiser, 5 years shaped by every decision that you're about to make. They smile, not because everything became perfect, but because they understand something that you don't yet. So you ask them one question: what should I do? Maybe they don't give you advice. Maybe they simply ask you a question in return. What are you still waiting for? Not in a judgmental way, not with disappointment, just with curiosity. Because from where they're sitting, the answer seems obvious. The opportunities you think are disappearing aren't disappearing because you lack talent. They aren't disappearing because you aren't worthy. They're disappearing because every day you wait, today quietly becomes yesterday. That's all time does. It keeps moving, whether we move with it or not. You know, one of the greatest lies I ever believed was that someday I'd become the kind of person who naturally did difficult things. That one morning I'd wake up and discipline would just be there, confidence would just be there, clarity would just be there, and fear would finally be gone. And it never happened. What happened instead was much more ordinary. I got scared, but I did it anyway. I doubted myself, but I took one more step anyway. I questioned whether I belonged, but I kept showing up anyway, over and over and over again, until one day I realized the courageous person that I thought I was chasing had quietly been built by every ordinary decision that I almost didn't make. Not one giant leap, thousands of tiny ones. And maybe that's why I love the phrase, the journey is the destination. Because life doesn't hand us courage at the beginning. Life lets us discover it by walking. There's another thought that's been sitting with me lately, and maybe it'll resonate with you. I don't think the opposite of fear is courage. I think the opposite of fear is trust. Trust that life can hold you. Trust that you can survive disappointment. Trust that mistakes are teachers, not verdicts. Trust that who you are is always greater than what happens to you. Because if you trust that, fear doesn't disappear. It simply loses its authority. Maybe that's what faith has always been. Not believing that everything will go the way you plan, but believing that whatever happens, you'll meet it. You'll grow through it. You'll become someone because of it, not despite it. So here's what I'd love for you to do after this episode ends. Choose one thing, just one. One phone call, one email, one page, one workout, one difficult conversation, one boundary, one apology, one job application, one meditation, one act of forgiveness, one first step. Not because it guarantees success, but because it changes something much more important. It changes the story you're telling about yourself, about who you are, because every action answers one silent question. Can I trust myself? And every time you follow through, the answer becomes yes. Maybe just a whisper at first, but whispers become beliefs, and beliefs become identities, and identities become lives. Thank you for spending this time with me today. These conversations are never really about having all the answers. They're about asking better questions. Questions that make us a little more honest, a little more awake, a little more compassionate toward ourselves and toward each other. And if today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love it if you shared it with someone who's been standing at the edge of something meaningful. Someone who's been waiting for the perfect moment. Because maybe this is the perfect moment. Not because everything is lined up, but because they're finally ready to decide. Maybe so are you. So until next time, keep choosing curiosity over certainty, presence over perfection, progress over permission, and remember, you're getting closer to aligned AF every single day. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today. If this episode spoke to you at all, share it with a friend or someone who needs it. You can also leave a review or connect with me online. You can find Aligned AF on YouTube, Facebook, your favorite podcast channel, or at alignedaf.org. And if you want to reach out directly, you can email me at alignedafpodcast@gmail.com. So until next time, stay aligned AF.